we tend to live our lives in fixed or scripted ways of being. What this basically means is we have a familiar way of seeing ourselves and how we behave, how we act, and how we live and show up in life. And these scripts or roles that we go into are the very thing that prevent us from living fully and prevent us from being really connected with ourselves and with our lives. These scripts are pernicious, and often we don't know that we're in them. They're just something that is in the background. They're the context or the frame from which we live our lives. And we're oblivious to that, again, for the most part. Recently, I visited London for the first time in a while. And it was also the first time I left my environment. So I've been in the same place for months. And the thing that most struck me about the trip, seeing friends, connecting with people, and doing things that I wouldn't normally do, what really struck me about that was the contrast between what that experience was like and how I felt and how I behaved in that environment compared to how I live in my life, in my home environment. And when I went back home, I was immediately struck by this, how differently it felt. And I could see, as if from the outside, I could see all the roles and scripts and kind of deadness with which I'd been living, all of which I had no idea I was in. It was, again, stuff I wasn't seeing. It was in my experience, but I wasn't noticing it, I wasn't owning it, I wasn't seeing it. But I saw it, and I've now started to let go of that. Now it's in my awareness, I can start to actually choose whether or not I want to continue with those scripts or whether I want some new way of being. So this became really, really apparent. And I wonder if you've noticed it too, if you've ever left your environment or typical way you live your life, gone and done something totally different, and then came back and realized, oh my God, there's so many things that I do here that I had no idea that I do. So many roles and patterns and scripts that I live in that were unseen. So one of the answers to this is to change your environment, is to have a different experience of yourself. And that's certainly something that I'm going to be doing more of in my own life. But here I wanted to speak about what I've learned and other things that you can do to break out of your scripts. And to be clear again, a script is kind of like a fixed way that you experience yourself. We all have scripts, there's nothing wrong with them, and it might not be possible to drop all of them. A lot of them are from when we're very young, and we have so many of them, it's like this huge identity mass that forms our sense of self, our self-image, and our social sense of ourselves as well. And it's really, really tricky to see all of that, but we don't need to see all of it. There's enormous freedom to be had in just recognizing some of it and letting go of some of that. So what are some of the ways that we can start to let go, recognize, release scripts and patterns of behavior, maybe of which we don't even know we're in? How do we do that? So one way is we change our environment. We've spoken to this already. Simply go do something that you wouldn't normally do, or change the setup of your life, right? Go visit someone, go explore, go do something that is uncharacteristic. Change your environment in some way. But this can go deeper than that. You can also intentionally put yourself in situations where you don't recognize yourself. So for example, if you're someone who tends to be really quiet around other people, you can actively try talking to people more. And if you're someone who chats with everyone that you meet, try being silent. Try not doing that. Likewise, if you're someone who's very spontaneous and who makes plans, does not make plans, and is impulsive about that, try making plans. Try pre-planning everything you do. If you're someone who makes plans, be spontaneous and try not making plans. And we don't do this in a way that is rejecting our preferences and how we see ourselves, but rather we're doing this to try to get a more fluid and elastic identity. The thing about having a fluid identity, which really just means being able to be any particular way and not believing that you're this fixed way. Because the thing about scripts and feeling like you're in roles and life is the same and that kind of thing, the thing about it is that it's very static. You always experience yourself the same way. And really what you want to do is experience yourself differently, or at least experience yourself in an expanded way, where you can't just predict how you're going to be in any given situation. Instead, you allow yourself to get connected with a sense of uncertainty, that you don't actually know how your day is going to go, you don't know what it's going to look like, and you don't know how you're going to experience yourself. Which leads on to another point. Scripts require certainty. They require us to be able to predict and know, specifically know, exactly how the day is going to go, exactly how you're going to be in any given situation. But what you can do is you can let go of the certainty. That undermines the scripts. If you really don't know how you're going to be, and you let go of knowing yourself in a particular way in a certain situation, then you could be free to be different ways, to experience the same situation in many different ways and have many different possibilities available to you. This will break you out of scripts. It'll give you a sense of aliveness. It will connect you back to yourself. Really, when we talk about scripts, it's like one side of the coin, where the other side of the coin is being connected, really connected to your life energy. And life energy is very creative. It's very explorative. It wants to learn and grow and expand itself in new ways. Whereas this static, fixed energy is more about recognizing yourself as something fixed, as being the same. It's like having a structure with which you know yourself. And don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's essential to have that, to recognize yourself in some way. And it's a process of letting go of your scripts and roles so that you can be more ways, you can be different ways. It's a process, and there's nothing wrong with being a fixed way. But you can think of these as like two sides of the same coin. And what we tend to do is we tend to give a lot of credence to being fixed and our survival as the way we know ourselves to be, instead of allowing ourselves to connect with our life and that genuine desire that we have to live fully, which often will go against our survival as the way we see ourselves, which is actually most of what we survive as, not physically surviving as a person, but rather we're trying to survive and persist an identity we have or an idea we have about ourselves, which tends to incorporate a lot of features about, are we a smart person? Are we a dumb person? What's our racial identity? What's our gender? What's our What's our family situation? What's our life story? What's our personal history? What do we like? What do we dislike? What are our preferences? Who do we spend time with? What are our interests and hobbies? What do we do for a living? What are we in various roles in our lives? So all of that is kind of like a identity we have, this enormous, complex thing that we see ourselves as, this identity. And we just want to make it a little bit less rigid here. We're trying to let go of some of that so we can see ourselves in more ways than just a fixed set of ways. We want to be able to see ourselves rather than as a limited subset, a limitless possibility. We're moving towards that because that's where life is. That's how you connect with yourself. You connect with yourself by really being connected with that limitless possibility that you are. And you could be so many different ways, not just one way. And any beliefs you have about yourself, where you feel you have to be a certain way, actually, it's almost always not true. And you can be so much more, so many different ways you can experience yourself. It's just the fear that holds us back from that, which leads us on to the final point, which is simply to lean into our fear. Our fear is our friend. It tells us, and if we experience it consciously, it tells us what it is that we think we are. It tells us the way we think we are. And it tells us how we can start to shift and to expand our sense of self. Because the fear is where we don't know ourselves, really. So if we can recognize and get in touch with our fear, we can start to practice stepping into a larger identity where we're not afraid of fear, we're not avoiding fear, but rather we're leaning into it and we're allowing ourselves to fully feel the fear and then step into it fearlessly and with a real sense of connection with ourselves. Because one thing about fear that I've always found is that if you want to really connect with yourself, fear will do it. You'll know exactly what you care about. You'll know exactly what is important to you. The fear will make it very apparent. And so I think it's good to lean into fear as a practice. So to summarize, we tend to live in fixed or scripted ways of being, roles or patterns of behavior that we identify with. And some of the ways that we can start to unpack all that and free ourselves of that are to change our environment, to change the way we show up so that we actively try to be ways that we are not or that we don't think that we are. To let go of certainty and to get comfortable, maybe this isn't even the right word, comfortable, but at least to get familiar with uncertainty and not knowing, and the fact we really don't know what's going on, and that we use knowing and certainty to create these scripts and fixed ways of knowing ourselves. And finally, we can lean into fear. That will ultimately always guide us back to ourselves, because the fear points you towards what you're afraid of losing. You're afraid of losing yourself. That's what the fear points you to. And it's also the gateway to discovering yourself, that you're actually more than what you thought you were. So I hope this was useful to you. Try some of these as a practice. See if you can free yourself of a script or two. I wish you all the best of luck with that. And I'll see you on the next one.